Wonderful. And we'll begin. So we'll start as we customarily do with just a moment of mental purification and intention setting. So you might close your eyes and just kind of open up and focus on the words as I say them. Let me speak for you to the extent that you're comfortable with me doing that. So tonight, as we sit down to practice, we let go of any unhelpful mind states and we replace them with thoughts of compassion for ourselves and others, thoughts of love and goodwill, thoughts of joy, thoughts of equanimity, thoughts of peace and freedom. May the merit of our practice here tonight go to the benefit of all beings everywhere. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. May it be so. All right, well, we'll move into our guided meditation together. So go ahead and take a moment to get into your comfortable meditation posture, whatever that's going to be, whether it's sitting or laying. Looking for balance in the body, as always, just trying to support your body weight equally on both sides, not having one side working harder than another. If you're sitting with your back relatively straight but not rigid or stiff, this helps us to breathe completely and fully. And it also helps to make it more comfortable in the long term because with the spine balanced, it minimizes the amount of muscular tension required to maintain the posture. So you can imagine that there's almost this state of perfect balance in the body with the spine straight, where it requires almost no muscular effort or tension. So we find that balance in the spine. It can be helpful to tuck your chin in forward just ever so slightly. That takes the pressure off the back of the neck sometimes. Helps you to be comfortable. And then your hands. If you're laying down, you may feel comfortable placing them at your sides. If you're sitting, it is often comfortable to place your hands palms up in your lap. I customarily place my left hand palms up on my lap first, and then I cradle my right hand in my left hand. Again, palms up, with the thumbs touching, overlapping slightly. For me, this is very comfortable. It's a very balanced way of sitting. And this is called the jhana mudra, the mudra of meditation. So find a comfortable way for your hands to be. You can close your eyes softly. And of course we do that just to eliminate the visual distractions in the room. It helps us to focus on our meditation. And then we breathe through the nose if possible. And breathe however you need to be comfortable, but if you can breathe through the nose, that's helpful. And just let the breath come and go naturally. There's no need to manipulate it in any way. Just let the breath flow. And so with all of these basics covered, I will sound the bell and I'll start to guide us through the meditation practice. Follow the sound of the bell as it begins to fade into silence. And let that silence be a wonderful, warm invitation to turn your senses inward. And it's okay to just let go of the habit of the mind, which is usually to be projected outward into the outside world. For the next few minutes, let's focus our awareness inward. Become aware of the feeling of being present in your own body. Become aware of the feeling of just being here right now in this moment, with no agenda, no expectations or requirements, just here, just aware. And with that sense of awareness established, let's bring it up to the top of the head and to the area of the scalp. And as we do customarily, let's just focus awareness on the sensations in the scalp. So bringing our awareness here, we open it up to sensations. And we do this in an objective way. We're not here to judge sensations as good or bad or right or wrong. We're here to simply observe sensations, whatever they are. And sensations usually show up as temperature awareness. It may feel warm or cool through the scalp. Sometimes there are sensations of air movement as the air circulates in the room. And you might feel that on your scalp, on your hair. And sometimes there are sensations on the surface of the skin, like a tickle or an itch or a pulsation. And so we're just opening up this objective awareness, just observing whatever the sensations are. We notice that they arise and pass away. Sometimes they arise and last for a few moments, and then they change into something different. And so with our objective awareness, we just observe. Observing these sensations. And then within the scalp, any tension, just let that go. Let the tension leave the scalp. Give it unconditional release, passage out of the body. And then as you let go of the tension and remain aware of the sensations still in the scalp, you'll often notice that there are more subtle sensations replacing the tension. There is often a feeling of peacefulness or contentment that takes its place. So we're just aware, we just observe. And then from the scalp we can guide our awareness downward, forward into the forehead and into the temples. Feel it moving down through the eyebrows and into the eyes. And so here in these parts of the body we open up our awareness, and we open that awareness up to sensation. Observing temperature, air movement, and sensations on the surface of the skin. Remember, this awareness is objective. It is simply the observing of the rising and falling away of sensations. You might notice how they are impermanent. No sensation lasts for too very long before disappearing or becoming something different. So we observe this characteristic of sensations. We let go of tension. So in the brow, if it's furrowed or if the eyebrows are raised, or sometimes there's tightness in the temples or the eyes are squinted, coming upon this tension, we simply release. We give that tension free passage out of the body, unconditional release. And then we continue to observe the sensations, just observing as they come and go, as they arise and pass away. And we can only observe sensations in the present moment. This is a very present moment experience. Just what's here now, that is what we observe. So now we can guide the awareness again. This time from the temples, we'll start to guide it down into the ears. And then I'll begin to name off a few parts of the body. As I do, bring your awareness there, and then just immediately release the tension. Do it even if you don't think tension is there. Just move awareness to the part, observe, release tension, remain aware. So starting that in the ears, and then from the ears we move the awareness forward. You feel it begin to pass through the cheekbones and into the face. And then from the eyes, we feel as the awareness flows downward through the nose. It passes through the lips and mouth and chin. And again, we're just aware of sensation, letting tension go, not judging good or bad, or right or wrong. Also, there's no sensation that you need to be feeling or should not feel. It's all about your personal experience in this moment, observing what is true in your awareness. So looking around for tension in some of these areas of the face, we might notice that the jaws are clenched or there's tightness in the teeth. Sometimes the lips are pursed. So it's helpful to notice these and release that tension, setting ourselves freer as we do so. And then from the face, from the chin, we can start to guide the awareness downward into the neck, into the throat, and focus here on the throat for a few moments. It is not uncommon for people to hold tension in the throat. So observing, we can release it, aware of the sensations in the throat, moving the awareness to the sides of the neck and the muscles there, and then moving to the back of the neck, all the muscles and sensations, letting go, remaining peacefully aware. And then from the neck, we can guide the awareness downward into the shoulders. You feel it spreading out through the shoulders from side to side. Become aware of the sensations here. If you're sitting on a chair or laying down, you may notice the feeling of contact between the shoulders and the surface upon which you're leaning. Sometimes you'll notice that there's tension in the shoulders. Shoulders might be shrugged. We can release that. Continue observing the sensations as they arise and pass away. And then from the shoulders, we'll move our awareness downward a little bit. We'll feel that moving into the upper arms. And here in the upper arms, we'll focus first on the front part, the biceps, from the elbow joints all the way up to the shoulders. And again, it's just a process of observing, letting tension go, remaining aware, and then moving to the next part. In this case, the inside surface of the upper arm, from the elbow joint all the way up to the underarm. And then from here, we can rotate the awareness backward into the triceps. And here we become aware of sensations. We let tension go. And we rotate around to the outside surface of the upper arms. Aware of sensations, temperature, air movement, sensations on the surface of the skin, sensations of contact in some cases. And then we begin to move the awareness down through the elbows. And you'll notice as we move through the body that you can really feel the movement of awareness. That there is a pleasant feeling tone associated with the movement of awareness. That there is a increased stability and peacefulness as awareness moves through in this way. So moving the awareness down through the elbows, we move it down through the forearms, feel it traveling towards the wrists and passing through the wrists, moving into the heels of the hands and the palms. And then from here we move the awareness around to the tops of the hands. Again, observing sensations, noticing any tension in the hands, allowing the fingers to rest and relax, allowing the hands to let go. And then from the hands, from the fingers, you can move your awareness all the way down to the fingernails and just hang out there for a little while, observing. Are there any sensations in the fingernails? So we just bring our awareness to it and we observe. And sometimes there may be sensations in the fingernails and sometimes not. So either way is perfectly acceptable. We're just here to observe without reaction. So now from the fingertips and the fingernails, we will move our awareness up to the top of the chest. So maintain a continuity of awareness as you move, being aware of the intention to move, the movement, the arrival of awareness at this new location. It helps us to maintain this continuity, continuing to remain focused without getting lost on the way. So with awareness spread across the collarbones now, we can guide it downward through the chest. And just feel it kind of traveling down slowly, passing through the tissues of the chest, the muscles, moving down all the way to the base of the sternum. And then from there it begins to spread outward through the rib cage, where you observe and release and remain aware. And then from the rib cage, you can guide your awareness to your underarms. Focus here for a moment, a part of the body that's often ignored or overlooked. So just be aware as you guide awareness down through the sides of the body. And you feel that awareness moving all the way down to the waist. And then here from the waist, we can bring the awareness forward into the belly. And here again, just begin to observe. So as you observe the belly, you might notice the rising and falling of the belly with the breath. You might notice a feeling of expansion or contraction. Sometimes there's that feeling of contact between the skin and the clothing. So you are open and aware of all of these. And let the tension in the belly go. If there's tension there, just let it release. Let the belly hang out freely, not trying to suck it in or hold it back, but just let it be free. and continue to observe the sensations after releasing that tension. And now from the belly, we'll make another move, so we'll maintain continuity of awareness, and we will move our awareness around to the top of the back, starting at the base of the neck. And so with awareness here, we move down, we spread through the upper third of the back, through the shoulder blades, observing. We guide that awareness down a little bit further into the middle third of the back. Again, observing, remaining objective, letting go of tension. And then moving down to the lower part of the back now and following that same process. Just observing, letting go, continuing to remain aware. And in the back, sometimes we run into sensations that we consider to be undesirable or unpleasant, sensations that we have some aversion to. So we might feel pain or fatigue or discomfort in parts of the back, very common for many of us. But as we become aware of these sensations in the back, we notice that our aversion toward them make it difficult to be objective, makes it difficult for us to be able to let go of the tension because there's an emotional component to it now. So what we discover is that by maintaining an objective, mindful awareness, that we can see clearly that these sensations are here, that they are present at this moment in time, and that we can either react to them with a great deal of aversion and negativity, which will cause us to suffer greatly, or we can say this is the sensation of the body at this point in time. This is the way the back feels now. And you'll discover that you have the capacity to allow it to be just as it is without reacting to it with negativity. And in just this simple practice, you can begin to bring peace. You can begin to bring harmony. So from the back now, from the lower back, we'll guide our awareness downward into the sit bones. Try to remain attentive as we move through the body. With awareness in the sit bones, we often feel the sensation of bearing weight or compression. We can move the awareness further through the hip bones, observing sensations here. And then moving a little further, moving throughout the pelvis itself, observing, letting go, no judgment, just aware. And then from here, we'll guide the awareness down into the thighs. And because the thighs are larger parts of the body, we'll focus on different parts individually. First, the tops of the thighs, the upper surface. We observe them, let go of tension. Then we rotate outward to the outside surface. We let go of tension. We observe sensation. And then we rotate to the undersurface of the thighs. Again, aware, attentive, letting go of tension. And then we move to the inside surface of the thighs, where we repeat that process, observing and letting go. And as we move part by part, we feel a greater degree of stability and peacefulness. Moving from the thighs now, we can guide the awareness down into the knees. Feel it moving through the knees, a soothing flow of awareness. moving down through the knees. It passes into the calves. It moves down into the shins. We continue to follow. It moves down toward the ankles. And it passes through the ankles and begins to move into the feet. With awareness in the feet, we can focus first on the heels, sensations here, and then moving to the soles of the feet. Same thing, observing sensations, letting go of tension, moving into the balls of the feet, and then rotating around to the top surface of the feet, observing, releasing, remaining aware, and moving that awareness down into the toes. And from the toes, let's move it down into the toenails. And for a few moments now, let's just observe what are the sensations in the toenails. And sometimes you might not notice much of anything. Other times you might notice this subtle feeling of energy in the toenails, pulsation, vibration. So we're just aware. And then bringing our awareness from the toes and the toenails, we'll bring it once again up to the top of the head and to the area of the scalp. But this time, I invite you to move your awareness back down through your body at your own pace. Sometimes it's helpful to use the breath as a way of measuring the movement of awareness. You can say, breathing in, I'm aware of my scalp. Breathing in, I release tension in my scalp. Breathing in, I'm aware of my forehead, temples, eyebrows, and eyes. Breathing out, I release tension from my forehead, temples, eyebrows, and eyes. And we discover that we can move the awareness through using the breath as a guide. But however you choose to do it, try to move part by part through the entire body, just so nothing is forgotten or left out. It's helpful to try and use the same path that we use together. As you're moving through, notice these places where tension has reaccumulated or reappeared. There are parts of the body where we let that tension go 5 minutes ago, and now we're noticing it's back. We might notice it in the jaws or the teeth, or maybe in the shoulders, maybe in the tummy, or maybe in the hands. Tension can reappear anywhere. What we discover, though, through repeated observation is that tension seems to reappear in the same places over and over. And this we call our areas of habit tension, habit energy. We become aware of these as the places where, when we experience difficult emotions, things that make us mad or sad or afraid or anxious, every time these difficult emotions come up, there is a corresponding sensation in the body. And it usually manifests as tension accumulating in a part of the body. And then the mind might move away, move on to other topics, other things, but the tension in the body remains as a result of the original difficult emotion. And in this way, the tension just kind of replays that emotion over and over. And the result is that we feel uncomfortable, we feel anxious, or we feel dis-ease in the body. So it's very helpful to notice these places where this habit energy shows up, where tension shows up, and all we need to do is release it over and over. We meet that tension with a mind filled with equanimity. which means we release it, and then we bring our awareness back to a state of peace, balance, non-judgment, freedom. And as we practice in this way, we really do begin to notice the calming of the body and the mind, and the natural clarity that comes to the mind when it is in this state of peace. So having moved the awareness down through the body, we will bring it now up to the base of the nose and that little patch of skin beneath the nostrils and above the upper lip. So we focus here first, and then we just add a very small additional area to the awareness, which is the rings of the nostrils. And then from here we add one more very small area to the awareness, and this is the nasal passages, just inside the nostrils, just inside the nose. So with awareness focused here, we now become aware of the movement of the breath. And this is called anapanasati. It means awareness of respiration. And so we're given this tool as a way to focus the mind over and over on something that is real, something that is available, something that exists only in the present moment, something we can observe continuously. So we observe the movement of the breath in and out. So you're actually with the breath enough to notice this is an in-breath, and this is an out-breath, and this is an in-breath, and this is an out-breath. And you find that this serves to focus and concentrate the mind. So let's expand it a little bit by remaining with the full duration of each in-breath. So as it begins, it picks up momentum, and then it slows and pauses. And then it reverses direction and becomes the out-breath. So we stay with the out-breath, just observing, following it as it leaves the body, remaining aware of the in-breath, the out-breath, the full duration. Also, we begin to notice that within the breath, some breaths are longer, some are shorter. Some breaths are deeper, some are shallow. So we try to maintain this awareness of all these subtleties. It helps to focus the mind. As you observe the movement of the breath, you may become aware of the feeling of touch. As the air passes through the nose, anywhere in that triangular area, you may become aware of that feeling of touch. And if you focus on that for a moment, you might notice how that feeling of touch has within it more subtle sensations. So breathing in, you might notice dryness in the air or coolness in the air. Breathing out, you might notice warmth in the air or moisture in the air. So you are using all of these subtle attributes of the breath, of the respiration, to focus your awareness. And as you do this, you strengthen your ability to focus the awareness. And this becomes very helpful. Sometimes, though, each of us will experience what we call distractions during meditation. And distractions are anything that occurs in the mind that pulls the awareness away from the breath, from the movement and touch and sensations of the breath. So oftentimes that happens as we hear a sound outside or in the room. The mind leaves the breath and goes to check out the sound. As soon as we become aware that the mind has moved, all we need to do is guide it back to the triangular area of the nose and the breath. And then we just let go of the distraction. Whatever the sound was, we just let go. There's nothing we need to do about it. And if there are any reactions to the sound, negativity, feeling annoyed, anything like that, just let that go. Bring the awareness back to the breath. And sometimes we'll discover that we're distracted away by strong physical sensations in the body. A feeling of fatigue, a feeling of discomfort or pain. And so this is the second type of distraction that reveals itself during this practice. When we notice it, once again, we simply return our awareness to the breath. We just become aware of that movement and touch and sensations of the breath. And then these difficult emotions, these things that stand in the way as reactions, they just disappear. And sometimes the mind wanders in thought. It's remembering or planning or thinking. And then we notice this too as a distraction. Oh, the mind is thinking. So I will guide my awareness back to my breath, letting go of all other thoughts and concerns. Just return to the breath and to awareness. And let the sensations, let the distractions just take care of themselves. They don't need any extra help. They fade away of their own accord. So we just follow the breath now. This is our anchor. Breathing in, we're aware. Breathing out, we're aware. Breathing in a short breath, we notice. Breathing out a long breath, we notice. Being distracted by any of the three types of distraction, we notice. We guide the awareness back. We refocus on the breath. And we create the intention in the mind that we wish to remain focused on the breath. And so this becomes very helpful. So let's practice this way together for just a few minutes in silence, returning to the breath over and over, releasing distractions over and over. And in a few minutes, I'll sound the bell to end the meditation practice. You just try to work with the triangular area of the nose and these techniques that we've discussed. Try to work with that for the next few minutes. And then I'll ring the bell. So allowing the sound of the bell to bring you back into the room. You can open your eyes when you're ready. You can begin to move around in your body if you want to. Move your legs a little bit. Feel free to stand or stretch or walk around. It's always helpful after holding the legs still for a period of time. So, feeling good. That was a very quiet practice. Good job, everybody. Every time we do that practice, we get a little stronger. And what it does is it reinforces the practice so that when we do it outside of this location, where you're doing it on your own, at home, in your car, wherever that might be, all of the aspects of this practice get stronger and stronger. They're reinforced every time we do them. So the more often you do them, the better. Hopefully you're able to practice a bit during the week with this for at least some time. But sometimes I share with people that if this is the only time a week that you meditate, there's still great benefit to it. Because a lot of this you carry with you when you leave here. So it's not nothing. It's a big deal to meditate in this way, even if it's just once a week. You will get real benefit from it. More in this case is helpful, but it's not a waste of time. So, well, before we get into the teaching, if anybody wants tea, there's the air pot in the kitchen. It's all full of hot water. Pump out some hot water into a cup and have a cup of tea if you like. And then we'll try and do that quickly so we can get right back into the teaching. Seems like you've really overcome the kind of the drowsiness of laying down while you meditate. It seems like that works pretty good for you, huh?
Pretty much.
Yeah?
I occasionally still doze off at home, but
Sure.
yeah, I've gotten a lot better.
That's great. That's great. It takes a lot of mental fortitude to be able to do that, to be able to lay down and meditate that way.
Well, yeah, you start meditating, it leads right into dozing off.
Yeah.
You start to relax.
Yeah, and sometimes, of course, that's even the goal. Like, if I'm having difficulty falling asleep, or I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't go back to sleep, I'll do a meditation practice with the goal of falling
I do that
asleep.
too. My mind's racing at night.
Yeah.
I'll just meditate.
Yeah. Yep. I still use that practice where I do the breath counting, the breath measuring, and then the breath expansion.
Okay.
And most of the time I can't make it to the end of that without falling asleep. So it really does work. It's a helpful one. So let's see. I have a handout for tonight, which I can give everybody. I guess we only need 3 of them. For now, here's one more. Thank you, Don. Appreciate it. I was happy to get this new printer because it is capable of doing these print jobs of these little booklets the way that people are used to.
Right.
And it seems like people like them. I guess people are accustomed to getting it this way. On one occasion, I printed it on white paper without folding it, and boy, I had a lot of people say, "Hey, we want that old format back." So. Yeah, so I made sure I've been able to do this, but
people don't like change.
No, not always. Not always they don't like change. But well, I want to have a little fun with this tonight, and by fun I mean I want it to be more dialogue based, where we're all just kind of talking about it and asking questions, and to me the dialogue really helps, especially when we get into some of these teachings that are maybe not quite as intuitive or obvious. It's really helpful to ask questions, talk about it a little bit. Before we do that, though, I thought I would make just a couple of quick announcements. that now I'm able to accept cards, debit cards, credit cards for class fees, donations, payments, merchandise purchases, books, any of that. So if you're interested in doing that, just let me know, and all I have to do is hook the card reader into my tablet, and you're able to do it. It's 100% secure, and it works quite well. It's very quick. So that is now available. The Donna box is, of course, out there. Any donations are greatly appreciated, so I appreciate that. It's helping us out. We're running right now 100% on donations and fees from classes and merchandise purchases. So we're getting to that point where we're lifting off the runway. So every little bit helps. And then I also wanted to share that this Thursday there's a depression management through mindfulness class that's starting here. It's going to be Thursday from 7 to 8:30 p.m. It will be 4 consecutive Thursdays. So if depression is something that you struggle with, or you know someone who does, you can talk to me about this, or you can enroll. But it's a very effective depression class. We've done it in the past, and we cover a variety of different strategies, not just meditation based, but also some best practices that we use in addition to that. So it's a very special class. So if you're interested in that in any way, you can talk to me, or you can register through me here. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, and I've shared this with you before, but over there on what we call the altar table, which is where we have all those pieces of paper, up on top of that table are a number of little strips of paper. Those are called omimori, or omikuji. Omikuji. And what they are is little strips. On the back side, there is the name of our meditation center. On the that's the front side. On the back side, there are some pre-written requests for healing or energy or prayer, if you will. There's also some that are completely blank. And so if you are to write a name of someone who could use some healing or some energy sent their way, you can put their name and what the specific thing is, fold that in half and drop it into the big bowl over there. And then I do use Reiki distance healing practice, and I work with those on a regular basis. So, and I find it's a real thing. It's it really does benefit people. So if you're interested in that, feel free, drop them in the bowl, and then I'll start to work with them with the energy healing. We've had some amazing things as a result. All of those end up getting, once I work with them, I fold them up into little strips so that you can't see what's on them, and then I tie them on the string there. And that's a Japanese tradition. You would see at temples there in Japan, but I think it's just kind of a neat thing. And then I also believe that the ongoing energy that we create in this place, that it is continuing to fuel those requests for healing and well-being and peace. So I think it's a real beautiful way to do that. Okay, so getting into today's teaching, what we're going to talk about is who you really are. Who you really are. And we're going to use the term Buddha nature. And we'll kind of explain that as we go. But just a little background information. So the historical Buddha was a person named Siddhartha Gautama. So this was a real person. Historians say this person did in fact exist, and did exist in the parts of India where they say he existed, and that he pretty much lived a life in accordance with the sort of historical record. They believe that that's largely true. So around 534 BC, this man, Siddhartha Gautama, was wandering through northern India, and he had been an ascetic for many years. He, just maybe to step back a little bit, his father was the governor of a very large area of northern India. Um, and as such, Siddhartha Gautama the family was wealthy, as the father was a governor. Sometimes they would refer to him as a king, and they would refer to Siddhartha as a prince. But really, his father was a governor of a large area of territory, ruled a lot of people. As a result, they were wealthy, and Siddhartha Gautama was often considered a prince. Well, in his experiences of life, he found the material wealth that he had and kind of the promise of future power once his father passed away. He found that less and less satisfying, especially as he began to look at the normal human suffering that others experience. He thought that he too was going to grow old, he's going to be ill, that he too will pass away at some point. And so what good are all these riches and luxuries and, parties and food if we're just going to end up suffering in the long run anyway? Is it possible to do something to end that suffering, even if it requires us to give up these riches, which are usually considered to be the source of happiness? And so after all of his years of wandering, it's said that he went and taught with many of the master teachers around India during that time, trying to learn different methods of meditation, learning different ways to practice, different techniques, different ideologies. And he found benefit from a lot of these. There were concentration practices, and so there were a lot of things that he did that helped. But what he did not experience is what he was looking for was liberation from suffering. That he was looking for something that would be a permanent fix, transforming to liberation from suffering once and for all. So after studying under all these different ascetics and teachers and priests, he came to the conclusion that none of those was quite right, and that he needed to meditate on his own until he could come up with what would be the final solution. So he went through a period of starving himself, near death, according to the historical records, until one day a girl passing by actually thought he was dead. And the girl had some milk and some rice, and she realized he was alive, and so she brought this milk and rice to him, and he ate it. And then after that, he realized, okay, the only way that I'm going to reach this final realization of liberation is that I need to eat enough to have strength in order to do this. So from there, he went through, he continued to take care of his body, no longer an ascetic, and he gained his health back, and he attained liberation from suffering. And so he happened to be living outside of a fairly large village at that point in time, and he had a very radiant appearance. By all accounts, he was a very handsome young man, and that because he had been brought up in a very wealthy environment, he had the behavior and the language and the mannerisms of somebody that was kind of princely or very well off. And again, a very handsome individual. And so as the local villagers would pass by, he was sitting under a tree just outside of the village. They were looking at him thinking, what an extraordinary being. What an incredibly beautiful being. We wonder what this being is. And at some point, some of the local villagers approached him, and they started to ask him. They said, are you a celestial being or a god? Are you a reincarnation of a god? Are you a wizard? Are you a man? And to all these questions, he replied, I am none of these things. I am none of these. I am awake. And so from just that simple exchange, he became known as the Buddha. And Buddha is not a person's name, rather it's a title meaning awakened one. or one who is awake. So this title, the Buddha, came to him after that exchange with these village people. So it's interesting to know that, because we're dealing with a real human being, a historical figure who went through an extraordinary set of experiences and a transformation in his life that changed his life forever. He became known as the Buddha because he said he was one who was awake. So then the question a lot of people have is, well, what does it mean to be awake in the Buddhist context? And what does that mean? What is awake? And the answer to this question, first off, it's found through meditation practice, which results in deep insight into the true nature of our experiences and into the nature of all phenomena. So this is the meditation practice that we do together. It's often called insight meditation, or it's called vipassana meditation, but it is the cumulative effect of the practice that we do every week together, and that those of us who meditate every day according to this technique are experiencing on a daily basis. So the meditation practice is, the way the Buddha put it, this is the direct path to liberation. The direct path. So it's not like there's years and years of circuitous wandering and frustration, but if you follow this, this is the direct path to liberation, direct path to awakening. So, as I said, insight into the true nature of our experiences and into deep insight into the true nature of all phenomena. So one of the first things we become aware of in the practice is of the impermanent nature of all conditioned things. So first off, what's a conditioned thing? Well, pretty much everything you see is a conditioned thing. Like the chair, that does not exist independently of itself as a chair, but at some point in time, somebody took parts, put them together, formed these different shapes of the chair, put the cushions on, put the feet on. The chair is a result of the assembly or the coming together of conditioned things. So just about everything you see is a conditioned thing. It's been put together. The cushions, they're conditioned, they're fabric, they're stuffing, they're sewing. The paper is conditioned in that it doesn't exist as paper independently, but it is wood pulp that has been mashed and joined together and bleached, and then it's flattened out into sheets, and then it's cut and stacked, and so paper is a conditioned thing. So by conditioned thing, we mean anything that's made of multiple components, and it becomes a conditioned thing. It doesn't only apply to physical objects, but it also applies to states of mind, states of consciousness. Our thoughts are conditioned things because we think about one thing, we think about an interaction that happened, the words we exchanged, the way we reacted. The way we reacted is the result of conditioned things because we learned over the course of our lives that certain things were acceptable or unacceptable, and that we would react in different ways to different experiences. So really everything is a conditioned thing. So we become aware of that. That's the first realization, is that we become aware of the impermanent nature of all conditioned things. So if something is conditioned, by its very nature, it's impermanent, right? Because these chairs, they'll last for a few years. At some point, these chairs will maybe end up getting compressed by some machine and recycled, or, they may end up getting placed somewhere and they might rust down to nothing. This paper, it might exist in this way for a period of time, but eventually it's probably going to get thrown away, and then it will decompose, or it will, biodegrade. So all conditioned things are impermanent. The body is a conditioned thing. because it is a collection of subcomponents. So the body itself, it is bone, it is tissue, it is flesh, it is hair, it's organs, it's blood, it's all of these different things. So the body is conditioned, made up of other stuff. So pretty much everything we see is a conditioned thing. In no way is that saying that it's like a insignificant thing or something that doesn't matter. We're just saying that conditioned things are of the nature to arise, last for a while, and pass away. Conditioned things are impermanent. So that's the first realization. The second thing we become aware of is the fact that these conditioned things are not us. Conditioned things are not us. They are not self. Okay? Because if something is conditioned, well, is this body myself? We might think about that and say, yeah, the body is part of myself. But if you think about it, body's conditioned, always changing. I look different than I did 10 years ago. I look a lot different than I did 20 years ago. 20 years from now, I'll look a lot different from this. And 100 years from now, I'll look completely different from this. So the body itself is conditioned things. The things we take to be self are unconditioned, and therefore we recognize that these are not actually the self, these conditioned things, because they're always coming and going. And what we think of the self as some sort of a relatively permanent entity that we are kind of occupying at all times, right? Does that make sense? It's kind of how we feel about the self. So that's the second realization. Awareness of the fact that conditioned things are not us. They are not self, because they're conditioned things. And third, we become aware that attachment to conditioned things results in dukkha, which is that Pali word for suffering. So when we get attached to conditioned things, it results in suffering. There's a little, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the author David Foster Wallace, but this is a little, very short book of his called This is Water. It's actually not a book, but what it is it's the written text of a commencement speech he did for a university. The guy was just a brilliant writer. But he talks about, and he's not talking about Buddhism in this context, but he's an incredibly intelligent person, and so he's kind of on the truth here of impermanence and the suffering that comes from relying on these conditioned things for happiness. So he says, just jumping into it here, he says, worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you'll always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die 1,000,000 deaths before they finally plant you. On one level, we all know this stuff already. It's been codified as myths, proverbs, cliches, bromides, epigrams, parables, the skeleton of every great story. The trick is keeping the truth up front in daily consciousness. Worship power, you'll feel weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to keep that fear at bay. I kind of stumbled over that, so I'll read that one again. Worship power, you will feel weak, afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out, and so on. Look, the insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they're evil or sinful. It is that they are unconscious. And I love that line. He's saying, it's not sinful, it's not evil, it's not wrong, it's unconscious. And that unconsciousness is the default setting. that most of us operate under. They're the kind of worship you just gradually slip into, day after day, getting more and more selective about what you see and how you measure value without ever being fully aware that that's what you're doing. And the so-called real world will not discourage you from operating on your default settings, because the so-called real world of men and money and power hums along quite nicely on the fuel of fear and contempt and frustration and craving and the worship of self. Our own present culture has harnessed these forces in ways that have yielded extraordinary wealth and comfort and personal freedom. The freedom all to be lords of our tiny skull-sized kingdoms, alone at the center of all creation. This kind of freedom has much to recommend it. But of course, there are different kinds of freedom, and the kind that is most precious you will not hear much talked about in the great outside world of winning and achieving and displaying. The really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline and effort and being able truly to care about other people and to sacrifice for them over and over in myriad petty, little, unsexy ways every day. This is real freedom. That is being taught how to think. The alternative is unconscious. The default setting, the rat race, the constant gnawing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing. So just love him as a writer, as an author, but I thought that really, in kind of a slightly unusual way, captures what it is we're talking about here, that these conditioned things are not capable of satisfying us on any kind of a perfect permanent level. So here's a question. If conditioned things can't be the self, what can? Is there anything unconditioned? And the Buddha said yes, that awareness itself can be unconditioned. And so we can extrapolate and say, so what are you? What you really are is awareness. And this unconditioned awareness is called nibbana in Pali. It's perfect, balanced, and free. Nothing added, nothing subtracted, just this. Through the practice of insight meditation, we become aware that our normal view of the world, which is delusion, is always colored by the lens of our own predicament. Our hopes, desires, and fears and beliefs. Therefore, we aren't actually seeing things as they are. We see things as they appear to be through this lens, which is necessarily distorted by our craving, clinging, and aversion. We sometimes refer to this lens as the self or the ego self. The ego isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the aspect of it that sees us as separate from everyone and everything else is the same part of us that leads to suffering, because it results in a feeling of perceived lack. So Siddhartha Gautama discovered that insight meditation, which is what we do, was the right path for us to not only come to know this intellectually, but to be able to know it experientially and therefore become free from suffering and the causes of future suffering. Not at some future date after years of toil, but here and now. We are all Buddhas to be, just waiting to awaken. And it really is that powerful, and it really is that possible. It's like if you were to absorb all of this information and just say, okay, that's what I'm going to do. That's the next step. You would move into this awakened state of being a Buddha. It's available to all of us. And again, it's the direct path to liberation. So you may ask, how do I acquire this state of awakening? How can I get Buddha nature? And the answer is you cannot acquire Buddha nature because you already have it. So this is kind of like having your glasses up on your forehead and not realizing they're there, and then looking around your house for them. Where did I leave my glasses? Where did I leave my glasses? Well, you can search forever because they're not out there. You have them. They're just right here, you know? So this is the truth about Buddha nature. You already have it. Buddha nature is also your nature. Just as being awake in the conventional sense is your nature. But sometimes you're awake in the conventional sense, or sometimes you're asleep, so you're not conscious of the reality that exists outside of your sleeping state. So I'm talking about conventional sleep and conventional awakening. When you wake up, however, you become conscious and aware on a completely different level. And the depth, the clarity, intensity of life in the awakened state, awakened in the conventional sense, is on a completely different level than that of the sleeping state. But despite all that, it's still a natural state of your own being, not something you have to go out and acquire. So what I'm doing is contrasting Buddha nature and awakening in that sense to just our normal, we're awake, and then every night we go to sleep. And then we wake up, and then the next night we go to sleep. Well, when we're sleeping, that's our reality. We have dreams and things, but there's sort of a murkiness and a lack of authenticity to those dreams that never really feels quite real. You know, sometimes it seems like it, but most dreams they're just sort of odd. They don't feel quite real, and you seem to wake up and you know right away, well, that wasn't real experience, but this is. I'm awake now. This is the real thing. And so that's kind of what we bring to this awakening into the Buddha nature perspective. It's that we're really used to walking around kind of sleepwalking. We're used to thinking of everything in terms of perceived lack and what we need in order to be happy. And all of these things are just like a dream overlaid on who we really are. And as we clear all that stuff away, all that clutter, then we finally get at the true self, Buddha nature, that unconditioned awareness. So if you think about your awareness, you know, this is there anything you experience outside of awareness? And the answer is no. Everything you experience through awareness. Everything that exists in your awareness. And then if you look, awareness doesn't exist within anything else. So this is kind of like the lowest common denominator. You know, awareness doesn't exist outside of you. Awareness isn't out there. This is awareness. Everything exists within awareness. What you're hearing, what you're seeing, every experience exists within awareness. Awareness does not exist within anything else. In this way, this unconditioned awareness is the true self. Unconditioned meaning we're not adding a bunch of ideas on top of it that, okay, as soon as I get this, then I'll be happy. As soon as I get rid of that, then I'll be happy. Let go of all of that. It's a shortcut, direct path to liberation. I'm awareness. What am I? I'm unconditioned awareness. When I see things as they really are, without looking through the lens of judgment and my own inadequacies and the things I'm afraid of and the things that I want and the ways I judge everyone else, when I look at everything through this pure lens of unconditioned awareness, I see everything as it really is, and I'm free. I'm free. And that's the liberation that the Buddha spoke about. So, this Buddha nature is always present in each of us. It may become dormant in some cases, and usually it is. It's covered by the clutter generated by a lifetime of sleepwalking, but it is there nevertheless. And sometimes I use this example of, if you had a light, let's just say that there was a light right here, and this light was your true Buddha nature. And so it's there, and it's gonna glow, it's gonna burn eternally. It is there. And then as you're growing up, you start to think, I need to look a certain way. I need to have a certain body type. I need to appear a certain way in order to be, in order to be happy, in order to be somebody that's going to be accepted by others. So it's just like taking a little something, covering up that light, dims it just ever so slightly. And then we think, and I also need to make a certain amount of money in order to be accepted by others, in order to be happy with myself, in order to feel like I'm adequate. So it's just like another little layer that gets laid over that light of Buddha nature, of awareness. And we might think, and I need to get a car and a house, and I need to get a partner or a spouse or whatever it is. So that's on there. Need to get a certain education. I need people to respect me. I need to have a title that people kind of look at me and go, wow, right? So after a while, it's just a very slow accumulation of layer upon layer upon layer. Gradually that light becomes dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until we can't see it anymore. It's still there. It's just covered up by wrong view, by not understanding the truth. And so this is the way, again, of cutting through all of that, the direct path to awakening, by realizing that all of those conditions that you put on your own happiness are the exact thing that prevents you from achieving it. And so if you're able to let go of the conditions that you put on your happiness, happiness will reveal itself. That's like peeling the layers off one by one. So, I'm hoping this is making sense so far.
What happens with awareness? I mean, don't I need all that stuff? I still need a house. I want a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
I want a job.
Mm-hmm.
I want people to respect me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do you do if you're aware? You lose all that stuff?
Nope. Now the difference becomes whether you're wanting those things with an awareness that these are not going to be permanent attributes of yourself that are going to provide permanent satisfaction, but that these are conditioned things and that they are not guaranteed to provide permanent happiness.
So I need conditioned things.
Yep.
I need to be aware that they are conditioned things.
Right, and not seeing them as the answer, kind of the magic formula that moves us from being unhappy to being happy on a permanent basis. So we might be aware, yeah, I have a spouse, I have a partner, I love this person very much, I want to be together with this person. But we know that everything that is conditioned is also impermanent and that things change. And so if we go through life with this appreciation of that or this understanding of that, then we're not so surprised when things change and it doesn't send us into this desperate tailspin, crashing into the ground. So
if I lose my job, I handle it better.
Yeah, if you lose your job, you understand this is not who I am. This is not me. This is a conditioned thing. I had a job. What I am at my core is this unconditioned awareness. Me losing my job happened within my awareness, but my awareness was left unchanged. My true nature, my unconditioned awareness remains unchanged by that. So it's almost like you could look at it as if you go into a movie theater, you go down to the theater and there's a big blank screen, and you could say that that's your awareness. And you start watching the movie, and there's a fire in the movie, and so on the screen there's a fire and it's burning, and you get kind of caught up in the story, and it's like, wow, the fire's burning, I'm on the edge of my seat. Well, that's just like a perfect metaphor for what we're talking about here, that the blank screen is the awareness, and we are projecting these images on it, and when we get caught up thinking all of this is real, then we're devastated when the house burns down, or we're wiped out when we lose our money. We get caught up in this drama. But there are also times in the movie where we're sitting there and we realize this is just a movie, and it's like a relief. It's like watching the horror movies that I like to watch. Scary thing comes up, and you sometimes just remember, hey, this is just a movie. This isn't real. So on the screen of my awareness, all this stuff is projected. But if there's a fire, that screen doesn't burn. If there's a flood, it doesn't get wet. If there's an explosion, it doesn't get blown apart, right? It's awareness is the thing upon which all of this is projected. But the pure, unconditioned awareness remains the same regardless. That it remains pure. So you see these things as kind of, they're almost like phantoms. They're almost like projecting movies on a screen. They're the ideas we have about things. But when we see that and we're willing to step back from that and just say, is it possible for me to look at this in a different way? That's where the liberation really starts to come from. So it doesn't mean you don't love your spouse any less, or that you don't care about your physical body, or that you don't try to, make improvements in your life in some way. It just means that these conditioned things are incapable of bringing permanent, lasting happiness, and as a result, you're gaining your happiness from the unconditioned awareness. You go back to that over and over, and this is where peace is. So when we meditate, it's like, whenever I'm wanting something during meditation, then I'm not feeling too good during the meditation. Whenever I'm letting go and just moving to equanimity during meditation, when distractions come up or ideas come up, well, then I feel peaceful. So that's kind of a real, there is an example of it happening over and over. That makes sense?
It does. Still, it's tough to wrap my head around, because I feel like if I lose a job, I'm going to suffer.
Yeah.
And that just means I'm not aware, but I can't feed the family. I have to find another job. I mean, that's
Yep.
some point of survival.
Right. So there are real things that we have to do, but ultimately, if you look at it, and this is maybe kind of a weird way of looking at it, but no matter what happens, the awareness is going to be okay. I mean, you can almost look at it as the house could burn down, but the unconditioned awareness that is at the core of your being, it doesn't burn down. The job gets lost, but the awareness is still okay. It's like the awareness is your true self, and it is impervious to these things. And then we could say after death, that awareness part of us is the consciousness energy that maybe moves into the next realm of existence. So it is this indestructible force, but it's the stuff that we're laying on top of it that makes it appear different. So, we're at about 8:35, so that we just kind of breezed through that one.
Sorry.
No, that's great. We appreciate the comments, because that's everybody's thinking the same thing, and so it's helpful to talk about that. But this is just one of the most beautiful teachings, because really what it comes down to, it says, you're enough. You're perfect. You're beautiful just as you are. The ideas you have to the contrary are the problem. You're not the problem. You're not flawed. It's these ideas that we have, that we overlay, that make us think we're not enough, not good enough, not worthy. And those are the things that make us fear. If we really get to that point where we're living in that unconditioned awareness, we might become aware of, oh, I lost my job, and that means that I'm going to need to get something else so I can support my family and so forth. But then there's not this fear associated with it. It's like, okay, pure awareness, I'll go get a job, no problem. It's out there. All I have to do is go through those steps. But this unconditioned awareness remains there, strong. So it's almost like the confidence behind that. You could reassure your children, yeah, I lost my job, but you know what? No problem. Tons of jobs out there. I'll go out and get one before you know it. Might even be better than the last one. Probably like it. Last job wasn't that great anyway. So we can start to work with it in a healthy way. But we better leave it here. And we'll pick this up again next week. So this is great. I really like this because this is kind of deep teaching, but at the same time, just very simple and liberating. So let's spend one moment before we go. Brahma Viharas. All this stuff is so wonderful and interesting, intriguing. But then we get to the point where we put it all down for a little bit, and we come back to these states of consciousness that are sublime, that exceed all others, thinking of the suffering experienced by other beings in the world, including ourselves. We're beings in the world. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And may all those beings, we have the sincere wish we could surround them all with love and kindness. And may all those beings be joyful. And may all those beings be truly, truly happy. And then may they be in a state of equanimity, which means there's peacefulness, there's freedom. They don't feel like they need anything. They don't have craving, clinging, aversion. There's no attachment. They are free. And then to you, sharing the space with me tonight, thank you so much for coming and sharing your consciousness, sharing your time, sharing these moments of your life. I appreciate you so much. May you all be truly, truly happy. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will see you next week. We're going to repeat this course on Sunday, this part that we talked about so far. So if you're interested in coming to kind of reinforce, get it again, please feel free.
Or to understand it better.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things. You'll kind of work with it in your head. You kind of chew on it, like a dog chews on a bone, and then you start to see aspects of this that just start to come clear and to make sense, So, but this is a wonderful one to me because I think there's really just a lot of freedom in this. A lot of real freedom and love. You need a pen, Don? Yeah. Here you go, sir. So yeah, I really appreciate those requests that are up there, and I